So I'm really privileged and very pleased today to be sharing the stage with three amazing people. So to all three of you, a really warm welcome. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to having a conversation with you. We've had so many over the years. This one's just more public than usual. So yeah.
Well, I kind of fell in the gaps all the way since I left school. During my school holidays, I used to go to Johannesburg and work with my uncle, Bill Ainsley. And so when I left school, I knew that I needed to be in that environment. So we had a farm in the Midlands of Natal, and that farm had a carpentry studio, a weaving studio, a ceramic studio. My mother used to paint. Besides growing potatoes and mealies and everything else. So that is my background. And people like David Kulwani and Masabidi used to come and take time out there and assist and learn.
I said, I wasn't exposed to art at school. I didn't get art at primary school or high school. And my first exposure to an art classroom was going to university. And wanting to choose a subject that my parents had no idea what I was going to do. And I laughed. I said, Mommy, you taught needlework. You do knitting every day. Daddy's a carpenter. He's been making little toys, wooden cars for us as kids. So I said, I think I picked it up from you guys, actually, and it's just now, it's something more formal because they had no idea what art was. And I laughed. I said, that is exactly the reason why we do what we do, is to actually get to those learners like myself that never had that exposure, and to also just open the mindset for parents to see the viability for learners. Not everyone is necessarily academically strong, but there are learners that are doing practical work.
I was myself studying art by accident at Rhodes University in the 90s. I'd gone to university to avoid army call-up. I was going to just do sciences because my parents had made me drop art at school, saying, oh, you can take it up afterwards. And I'd kept drawing, and it actually turned out to be a good piece of advice, because very often art at school can be the worst thing for an talented art person to do, because very often the art teacher is very grumpy and doesn't necessarily enjoy teaching what they teach, and so it can ruin your appreciation of art, as it can happen at university as well. Very few, it takes a special person, someone like Walter Altman, who is both an artist and an art teacher. Jill, you as well, you guys, the artists and teachers, it's a rare thing.
And I was someone that was, very enthusiastic about becoming an art teacher. I knew that I wanted to be an art teacher from the age of 12. I was one of these very weird people. I had parents, and my mother in particular, who was denied access to art education when she went to her father to ask permission to pursue it outside of her training as a teacher. He said no, mostly because they didn't have the resources to do it. And so one of the first things that I think my mom wanted to do as a parent was to provide that space for her children.
One of the challenges at the Craft and Design Institute, then the Cape Craft and Design Institute, was to identify sort of the critical gaps in education. And they discovered, or a very easy win is the idea that it's at early childhood development stage that your first and your most important art education happens. In fact, it is all art education at that level, and it is our least trained and facilitated and looked after field.
I think that the the non-formal, you call it,
Yeah.
and the formal are being bridged, and I'm really interested in how they're bridging. So an artist who doesn't have a qualification at all can still be a teacher in an institution, and I'm really knocking on those doors because these artists are actually really good teachers. So the upskilling that is happening in the Orange Art Project and other projects is actually making teaching more available. So it's breaking down the walls, to use that phrase, where somebody without an education has an opportunity. And I really like to encourage that.
The important thing about art centres that I wanted to say was that they took on a kind of role or an in-between space keeper between what was happening in the non-formal sector and the public schools. So they served public schools, but they also ran programs which were extramural or voluntary or outside of that formal space. And they managed to hold that space within one institution and to do all of those things.
I'm from the Peter Clarke Art Centre, where I manage the Imbali project. At the Art Centre, we outsource arts education to a number of schools across the Western Cape. Our program also outsources learners from various communities, ranging from your grade R to grade 12 with various abilities. We are currently working in different communities, as you said earlier on, with the arts education, and not necessarily sticking within the formal arts education, but breaking away and doing more hands-on practical work with learners. We are also involved in many different community projects, as far as Ocean View area, where we are doing community projects within libraries, and basically just getting learners the opportunity to interact with art and materials which they wouldn't necessarily receive at home or anywhere else at these schools.
They have, for me, what's really important and significant about the moment that we're in, and specifically because we happen to be here and working with the education department in the Western Cape, there's been a real embracing of the work that Imbali have done through this book, and the resources that that museum is creating and that others are doing, and I think a real realization by the education department that they need to embrace and to work alongside what is happening in these projects, and the kind of resources. And for me, that's a significant moment.
Currently working with City of Cape Town Department of Social Development, and since 2019 when I was here, they started an emerging artists program. Problematic title, it's more like early career artists, but creating through the Social Development Department a access program for professional development for artists to leapfrog into an art career. And these are anybody from 19, 20-year-olds to 40, 50-year-olds who've just started making art or have never really had an exhibition. And we've got a show next week of probably about our 8th cohort of about 20 learners who've done various portfolio development and social media training.
When Tupelo started, we weren't allowed to work black people with white people. So the first 2-week workshop was illegal, and it happened wonderfully thanks to funding from Sweden. And the idea was to feed the adults, to feed the parents, so that they could then go and tell everybody else from all the countries they came from what other artists were doing in the world.
The physical training is also very much important for teachers. In a few responses of our teacher training through the Imbali project, I always get teachers coming back and saying, "Oh, thank you for the wonderful workshop. It was fantastic to be there and actually listen to someone that knows what they're talking about, an artist that has actually broken up the curriculum so that I can understand it as a teacher." Because, to read something is difficult to implement it if you haven't been taught or trained to do something like that.
The one real aha moment when I was working here was this project which we called MOCAA on the Move, where before the school kids came to the museum, we actually went to them and asked them what is a museum, and through a set of research questions, intermediate students spent a day with us creating a museum of their school through their stories, drawings and collecting of objects, and presented it to us in a museum format to understand the role of a museum in telling stories. And so in the way that institutions like the Zeitz MOCAA Museum and the outreach programs, I know Norval has a link with the Liesl Arts Project. Those are the sort of the implementers.
So where I am right now is in the Orange Art Project, which started during COVID, because my sister worked in a cluster of foster homes called Home from Home. And as I have learned all my life, is to try and respond to a need. And the need of these mothers living in homes that were locked down with 6 children aging between birth and 18 was something I thought really needed to be addressed. So I got the cell phone numbers of the mothers and started teaching over cell phone. So we could talk to each other, we could show each other pictures. I could say, please draw a picture of where you live, etc. And then they'd send me the pictures. And over the last 3 years, it's grown into a body of 10 artists who are now teaching in 23 to 24 homes. It's a very sort of movable landscape, as you can imagine. There are over 1 million children looking for foster care in this country. And the homes, these 34 homes in Home from Home, have added this art or mentoring experience to their families. And it's extraordinary, the impact. When you don't work with curriculums, where there is what you need to do is respond to an adult or a child and give them their space for this image to emerge and then to help them to make it. So for me, these books have got a holding space as well as a thread of systems that one can use in a curriculum. But what I can do is simply leave the books there. And if somebody says to me, what about portrait painting? Then we find the book that tells us about it. So they are valuable to my kind of education, as well as the education that is far more structured.
The thing I really learned here in Zeitz MOCAA is art is not an answer, it's a question. It's the best teaching tool. Art in the curriculum should not be to teach artists. Artists will happen anyway. A lot of the artists that are shown in Zeitz MOCAA are so-called self-taught. So for me, the art in the curriculum is about enriching the educational experience for those who are not necessarily going to be artists, and definitely to make the learning journey a lot more rich.
As an art educator and designer, I can honestly say books like these, we are inspired by them. So yes, maybe not being an art teacher or just a facilitator, these things can be broken down and taken into so many different aspects, not necessarily just within a classroom, but within a safe space or extramural class or environment where, like in certain homes, we found the need for learners to express themselves. So I'd like to just say and ask that we continue this work that Imbali has been doing and grow from here, because it is something that is needed, and making it more accessible to all our learners, to learners like myself that was not exposed to art in high school, like you just said, or in primary school, but to make it more accessible for each and everyone to actually be able to get into a library and get a book that is related to art or got to do with something that's for everyone to use. Yeah, so thanks for this afternoon.
Thank you so much.